The beeping was the first thing I noticed, a steady electronic pulse measuring my existence in even intervals. They say when you're in a coma, you can sometimes hear what's happening around you. They're right. I heard everything. The doctors, discussing my prognosis in clinical terms, my mother's prayers, whispered into clasped hands, and my wife, her voice changing over time from desperate pleas to annoyed sighs as she spoke to the nurses. It was day 47 when I heard the television in my room reporting local news. I wasn't paying attention until I heard my name. Local. Businessman Michael Harrow remains in a coma following the accident 3 months ago. In related news, his wife, Caroline Harrow, has filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. Sources close to the family say Mrs. Harrow is seeking full control of their joint assets and business holdings. The beeping accelerated slightly. A nurse came in to check on me, adjusted something, and the machine returned to its steady rhythm. But inside my mind, a storm was brewing. Irreconcilable differences. While I lay here, unable to defend myself, unable to fight back, or so she thought. What Caroline didn't know, what no one knew, was that my silence wasn't inactivity. It was preparation. Even as I lay motionless, connections were forming in my mind. Plans, building upon plans. They thought I was gone, but they had no idea what I'd been planning. The doctors had given me a 30% chance of waking up. Caroline was betting on the other 70%. She was about to lose that bet. I met Caroline at a charity gala 15 years ago. I was 28. She was 25. I had just sold my first software company and was flush with cash and confidence. She was working in public relations for the event, efficiently managing the room with a clipboard and an earpiece. "We're going to build an empire together," she whispered to me on our wedding night as we danced under the stars. And we did. I founded Nexus Technologies with her by my side, handling our image, our connections, our social capital. I was the technical mind. She was the face. Together, we grew the company from a small startup to a major player in cybersecurity. The first sign appeared 3 years ago, a small discrepancy in our financial records that I discovered during a routine audit. When I mentioned it to Caroline, she dismissed it as an accounting error. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? Then came the accident. I was driving home late from the office. The roads were slick with rain. They said a truck lost control on the curve. I don't remember the impact, just the headlights filling my vision, and then nothing. I do remember waking up briefly in the ambulance. Caroline was already there, her face pale with shock. For a moment, I thought I saw something else in her expression. Calculation, perhaps. But then the darkness claimed me again. Now, listening to the hospital room television announce our divorce to the world, those memories surfaced with new context. The missing funds, the secret meetings, the look on her face in the ambulance. What she didn't realize was that I had my own insurance policy. 2 weeks before the accident, disturbed by the growing inconsistencies, I had quietly backed up critical files and established a secure server that only I could access. I had spoken to a lawyer friend about creating contingency measures for the company. Even in my coma, those steps now formed the foundation of what would become my counterattack. The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes was the ceiling. Plain, white tiles with small pinholes. Not the ceiling of my hospital room. "He's awake," someone said. A nurse's face appeared above me. "Mr. Harrow, you're at Evergreen Rehabilitation Center. You've been in a coma, but you're awake now. Do you understand?" Me? I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and unused. Only a rasp emerged. The next hours passed in a blur of medical evaluations. My body was weak, but my brain was intact. "You're a miracle case, Mr. Harrow," the doctor said. "Nearly 7 months in a coma with no measurable brain activity, and now you're answering complex questions on your first day awake. 7 months. I'd lost over half a year of my life, but I hadn't lost my memory, or my purpose. It wasn't Caroline who came to see me. It was my mother, her face lined with new wrinkles. When she saw me, she burst into tears, clutching my hand, between both of hers. During my recovery, my mother filled me in on what I'd missed. Caroline had indeed divorced me while I was unconscious, a controversial but legally possible procedure given my medical condition. She had leveraged her position as my wife and business partner to take control of much of Nexus Technologies. She told everyone you had made verbal agreements about the company's future, my mother said. The board voted to support her. All, except Thomas Wang, my old college roommate and our chief technology officer, my one true ally on the board. On my 10th day at the rehabilitation center, a legal aid arrived with documents from the divorce. I was legally single, removed from my position at my own company, and left with only my personal assets, ADD, fraction of what Caroline and I had built together. As the legal aid explained the terms, I nodded politely, playing the part of the confused patient still coming to terms with his new reality. That night, I powered on the tablet my mother had brought me. With fingers still clumsy from disuse, I logged into an email account Caroline knew nothing about. There, untouched for 7 months, was the digital insurance policy I had created before the accident. I opened the first file, financial records, showing unexplained transfers from our corporate accounts to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Transfers authorized by Caroline's digital signature. In the sterile quiet of my rehabilitation room, I smiled for the first time since waking up. Game on, I whispered to the empty room. The sparse apartment my mother had rented for me was nothing like the penthouse Caroline and I had shared. Basic furniture, beige walls, a view of the parking lot instead of the city skyline. But it served its purpose, a base of operations. Physical therapy was grueling, but I pushed harder than my therapist recommended, driven by a need to regain control of my body as quickly as possible. 3 weeks after being discharged, I contacted Thomas Wang, arranging to meet at a coffee shop. He almost didn't recognize me when I walked in. I had lost 40 pounds, my designer suits replaced by generics, sweats, my once confident stride now careful and measured. "Jesus, Mike," he said, rising to greet me. "It's really you." "Thank you," I said simply as we sat down, "for being the one person who didn't betray me." Thomas leaned forward. "What they did was wrong, legally questionable at best, outright fraud at worst. But Caroline was very careful. Everything has a paper trail that makes it look legitimate." "Not everything," I said, pulling out a secure thumb drive. "I need your help accessing the Nexus servers." That night, Thomas and I began the digital excavation. Using his access and my knowledge of the system architecture, we bypassed the security protocols I had designed years ago. "Look at this," Thomas said, pointing to an email chain. They were discussing how to restructure the company's assets 2 months before your accident. By dawn, we had assembled a disturbing timeline. Starting nearly a year before my coma, Caroline had been systematically positioning herself to take control. The final piece fell into place when we uncovered deleted text messages between Caroline and our head of security, with whom she had been having an affair. "We need to be patient," one message read. "An opportunity will present itself. It always does." The timestamp was 3 days before my accident. "Mike," Thomas said, seeing my expression, "what are you going to do with all this?" I closed the laptop, slowly, my mind racing with possibilities. "I'm going to take back what's mine," I said, "and I'm going to make sure Caroline never sees it coming." As dawn broke over the parking lot outside my window, I began drafting a letter to an old friend who had become a high-powered attorney specializing in corporate litigation. The war had begun. My physical strength was returning, but my battle was now primarily intellectual. In the quiet hours of the night, I meticulously built my case against Caroline. Each document I uncovered was another bullet in the chamber. my lawyer, Eliza Harmon, was blunt when I showed her what I had gathered. "This is compelling, Mike, but it's still circumstantial. We need something definitive that proves intent." I expanded my investigation, discreetly reaching out to former employees who had left Nexus under Caroline's leadership. A few were willing to talk, sharing stories of hostile work environments and ethical corners cut after my departure. Late one night, as I was combing through the company's cloud backup, I discovered a folder of audio recordings, Caroline's dictated notes for meetings. Most were mundane, but one file, dated a week after my accident, made my blood run cold. "Plan B is now in effect," Caroline's voice said calmly. "With Michael incapacitated, we can accelerate the timeline. Jason has assured me the board will support the leadership transition. The accident was unfortunate, but we can leverage it to our advantage." I replayed it 3 times, my hands shaking. Not quite a smoking gun, but close. My phone rang, startling me. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "They know you're looking." The voice was distorted. "Every system you access leaves a trace. Be more careful. Use the proxy server I'm texting you." The call ended. Seconds later, my phone chimed with a message containing a string of code. Someone was watching. Me. But they were also helping me. An ally inside Nexus, or someone else with a score to settle against Caroline. "We need to talk about Marcus Vega," Thomas said 2 days later at a diner far from my apartment. "Caroline's head of security? And her lover," Thomas confirmed. "He's been asking questions about server access logs. Something triggered their security protocols. So that was who my mysterious caller had been warning me about." "Can they trace it back to us?" Thomas shook his head. "Not definitively, but they know someone's digging. I considered our options. I think it's time we found some friends." The first was easy. Diane Lowell, our former chief marketing officer who had been forced out after my accident. She now ran her own consulting firm. "I always knew something was off about how Caroline handled everything," Diane said when we met. "She told the executive team you had discussed succession plans that put her in charge. I never believed it." "Will you help me?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" The second ally was more complicated. Alexander Reeves, Caroline's current assistant. Getting to him without alerting Caroline would be tricky. The solution came in the form of a cybersecurity fundraiser where Nexus would be a sponsor. Alexander would be there, managing logistics for Caroline. I attended under a false name, my appearance still different enough to avoid immediate recognition. When I spotted Alexander at the bar, I made my move. "I'm Michael Harrow," I said quietly. After introducing myself, his eyes widened before he regained his composure. "I need to get these drinks back to—" "I know you've seen things at Nexus," I interrupted. "Things that don't add up. I'm asking you to help me uncover the truth." Alexander was silent for a moment. "The bartender at the Compass, 10 p.m. tomorrow," he finally said before walking away. The next night, I arrived at the Compass early. Alexander arrived exactly at 10, carrying a manila envelope. "I can't stay long," he said, sliding the envelope across the table. "These are copies of meeting minutes from the emergency board session where Caroline was named interim CEO. There's also a memo she drafted but never sent, outlining a transition plan dated 2 weeks before your accident." I stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" "Because the company you built meant something," he said simply. "It doesn't anymore." As he left, he added, "Caroline's pushing for a vote next week to officially remove interim from her title and restructure the company. If that happens, the old Nexus effectively ceases to exist." The memo was exactly what I needed, proof that Caroline had planned her takeover before my convenient accident, but I had less than a week to act. I called Eliza. "We need to move now." The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. By Wednesday, my team was in place. Diane had spoken with 3 board members, planting seeds of doubt about Caroline's leadership. Alexander had ensured that the meeting documents included several pages Caroline had not approved. Thomas had prepared a digital presentation that would run automatically when connected to the boardroom system, a presentation Caroline wouldn't be able to stop once it started, and I had arranged for a court reporter to be present, officially there to document the proceedings for an internal audit. "Are you sure you want to do it this way?" Eliza asked as we reviewed the plan. "We could file the lawsuit first, let the legal system handle it." I shook my head. I need to see her face. The day of the meeting, I dressed in a suit for the first time since waking from my coma. It hung loose on my still recovering frame, a visual reminder of what I had endured. Eliza and I arrived at Nexus headquarters 15 minutes before the meeting. Through the glass walls, I could see the board, members assembling, and there was Caroline, commanding the room in a tailored blue suit, her hair now cut in a sharp bob. She looked powerful, confident, untouchable. Not for long. At exactly 2 p.m., the boardroom doors opened. Caroline's back was to the door as we entered. I heard the sudden hush fall over the room, felt the collective intake of breath, and then Caroline turned around. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound emerged. "Hello, Caroline," I said, my voice steady. "I believe my name is still on the building." The next hour was a carefully orchestrated dismantling of Caroline's facade. Thomas's presentation displayed the financial irregularities, the secret meetings, the orchestrated campaign to undermine my leadership. Alexander provided first-hand testimony about documents he had been asked to alter. Diane outlined how key clients had been misled. And finally, I played the audio recording. Plan B is now in effect. With Michael incapacitated, we can accelerate the timeline. Caroline's own voice, unmistakable in its calculated calmness. "These are serious allegations," the lead board member said. "Ms. Harrow, would you care to respond?" Caroline had recovered somewhat, though her hands still trembled. "This is clearly a vindictive attack by a man who cannot accept that the company has moved on without him. The recordings are edited, the documents fabricated. Michael suffered a traumatic brain injury. His perception cannot be trusted." "And what about my perception?" came a new voice from the doorway. Marcus Vega, head of security, stood there holding a flash drive. "Marcus," Caroline said, confusion evident. "What are you doing here?" "Choosing the right side for once," he replied, approaching the table. "I have the original security footage from the night before Michael's accident, the night you asked me to tamper with his car." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. This was something even I hadn't known. "That's a lie," Caroline hissed, but her face had gone ashen again. Marcus plugged the drive into the presentation system. The screen showed Caroline and Marcus in her office. "It needs to look like an accident," her recorded voice said clearly. "The brake line, can you handle it?" "I never thought it would go this far," the real Marcus said. "A divorce, a corporate takeover, that was one thing. But attempted murder? I can't live with that anymore." Caroline lunged for her bag, but Eliza blocked her path. Within minutes, security was escorting her from the building. The emergency board meeting that followed was brief. I was reinstated as CEO, effective immediately. A full investigation was ordered, with all findings to be turned over to the authorities. The boardroom emptied. I remained seated, staring at the chair where Caroline had sat for 7 months, planning her empire while I lay unconscious. "What are you thinking?" Eliza asked, touching my shoulder. "That revenge isn't as satisfying as they say," I replied honestly. "But justice feels right." In the weeks that followed, Caroline was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted murder and corporate fraud. The company I had built began the slow process of healing. I found myself spending more time with Eliza, our professional relationship gradually evolving into something more personal. My mother moved closer into a comfortable house I bought for her near the coast, a thank you for never giving up on me. And on quiet evenings I would sometimes think about Caroline, now awaiting trial in a cell as confined as the coma that had held me prisoner. We had both been trapped, she by her ambition, me by my broken body. Only one of us had truly escaped. In the silence of my coma, I had found clarity. And now every secret laid bare was my ultimate victory. Not because I had destroyed Caroline, but because in fighting to reclaim what was mine, I had discovered what truly mattered. The empire we had built together was never worth the cost. But the life I was building now, that was worth everything.